years we've brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs have been breeding. TV sucked in ideas from our head. Public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur. Hello, Internet, Derby neighbors in the Valley area and beyond. I am Eugene Driscoll. Welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indie Podcast. We are live. It's 10:31 in the a.m. Friday, September 12th, 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to introduce, making his debut appearance on Valley Navel Gazing, our podcast, Derby Finance Director, Mr. Brian Hall. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Eugene. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I was saying just before we went live, a lot of times, in my experience as a local reporter, it's hard to get the numbers guys to come on and talk about stuff because usually, they're kind of not public facing. But I really appreciate the fact that you're on here and that you're so accessible in general to me as a reporter, because the finance is the stuff that matters, right? We're going to be talking about bond referendums today, and that ties into the mill rate and all that kind of good stuff. And as anybody who knows local reporters or people who have the ability to write, we cannot add. So we need guys like Brian to explain this stuff to us in a way that is digestible and accessible. So thank you, Mr. Hall.
Thank you, and I will do my best to try to do exactly that.
And I have Jasmine is off camera. Does Mr. Hall sound okay? Is his mic a little low? Is he all right? All right, there's no answer. We have no answer for that. I'm going to turn up your mic just slightly. I'm a little paranoid. But so like I said, if you're not familiar, there is a capital needs referendum coming up in the city of Derby on Election Day. I believe it's November 4th, 2025. And so a number of items are being posed to voters for their approval. And if I can share my screen, we can go over this real fast. I'm getting Google updated, and now it's asking me things. Leave me alone, Google. But here's an article I think we published. I don't know when we published this. Back in August. Wow, time flies. You can see the wonderful graphic there made at canva.com. We are very talented here. Derby, the member of the city's Board of Aldermen and Alderwomen, voted August 14th to send a $6.5 million bonding request to voters in November. Alderwoman Sarah Wadomski voted against the motion, the only nay vote. The money will be used for the following items according to a list provided by the Derby City Hall Finance Department, also known as this guy, Mr. Brian Hall. $3 million for 2 Derby Fire Department pumper trucks, $1.5 million for a rescue truck for the Storm Engine Company, $560,000 for 2 Department of Public Works trucks, $550,000 to replace the public safety radio system, $400,000 to replace the HVAC system at Derby Public Library, $358,000 to replace a chiller at Derby Middle School, and $132,000 for contingency. So you all know that part is about inflation, right? Because the economy is kind of crazy right now, and inflation is what it is. So there's the article. And is that right, Mr. Hall? Did I get that right in that submission there?
Yes, you did, Eugene. I think that's exactly what we're hoping to get passed in November.
And so the first question I'll ask you, when I posted this on Facebook, all right, I'm getting a thumbs up. Mr. Hall sounds good. We're all right. I'm not making anybody deaf, blowing out anybody's speakers. Okay, great. Thank you. You put it to social media, and people were immediately concerned about, some of the reaction was, and I'm summarizing and paraphrasing here. Oh my God, Derby, are you kidding me here? You just increased our taxes last year. Now you're going to hit me with another tax increase while these items must be needed. Now's not the time to do it. My taxes are already through the roof. Why are you doing this to me? This is going to result in another tax increase, mill rate increase. You know where I'm going with this. So that's my first question. What is this going to do to the mill rate in Derby, Mr. Hall?
I mean, the short answer, it's not going to do anything to the mill rate. I expect that this borrowing is going to occur over multiple years. We're going to stagger it. I have many levers at my disposal when it comes to debt. As far as the duration, we're going to try to spread this out over 20 years. And again, minimize any potential impact, again, which I expect to be zero. We can refinance a lot of the existing debt to make sure, again, that no impact to the mill rate occurs. So it's going to do nothing to the mill rate. And honestly, that's why it's so important that we do this. We're spending over $100,000 a year in maintenance fees on these 30-plus-year-old vehicles. So between those costs coming down, existing debt rolling off, and then some of the levers that I can pull when it comes to debt refinancing or financing of this debt over the 4-year period, there will be no impact to the mill rate.
And you can understand why somebody listening might be skeptical of that, because there was a big mill rate increase, not this past spring, but the spring before. And we've been told now, I mean, Derby residents have been told for years. Well, first we're told the city's finances, we've got holes in the budget. And I'm going back to like Mayor Zekin's administration, where they discovered that some grant money had been double counted and some other mistakes were made. And Mayor Zekin blamed it on Mayor Dugato's administration. Then we were told we're on the right path. The ship has been straightened. Derby finances are fine. And then Mayor DiMartino comes in, and again, we're in a $2 million hole, and and both times tax is part of the recovery plans. There's been 2 recovery plans issued in the city of Derby to deal with these financial problems in less than 10 years. Both involved mill rate increases. One was by a Republican mayor, one was by a Democratic mayor, most recently Mayor DiMartino. So when you talk about no mill rate increase, can you explain a little more about you have existing debt now? I guess you're saying some of that debt comes off and this new debt goes on, because I'm not sure even I understand. This is told to me all the time, but I don't get it.
Sure. So, your debt, when you borrow the money, you're going to spread out those payments over, likely 20 years before you're going to pay it down. So Derby's got a little around 18 million right now in debt on its books that it's paying off each year. But that amount, if you don't add new debt to it, right, the amount that you're going to pay each year goes down. And so that's where I'm talking about, where you're going to have some additional financial flexibility as the years go on, because your existing debt, it's just going to cost you less over time. As far as, when we talk about the mill rate increases and what's happened in the past, part of the problem with what's happened historically is when you do no mill rate increase for so many years, you're almost forced to do a big mill rate increase in the years when you finally bite the bullet and address the problem. And that's what's done. Mayor DiMartino had to do that from just previous years and years of no changes, no sort of financial expense cutting or anything else to kind of address the fact that the revenues were far less than the expenses year after year after year. And it was creating those deficits. So, when I talk about no mill rate increase for this particular referendum, I do believe that we wouldn't have to do anything just specifically for this referendum. I think over time, Derby's got to get back to, normal financial practices of small, inflation type increases over time, which, should and do need to start to occurring at some point in the near future. But, it won't be anything that's going to spike, let's say, because of this particular referendum. I know you had asked me, what would the impact be if we just tried to fund all this out of the operating budget, and then that would cause a huge mill rate increase, maybe 6 to 8 mills if you just tried to generate $6.5 million of additional tax revenue in 1 year. And so obviously that's not what we're looking to do. we're going to have to spread out this $6.5 million over a 20-year period, which, like I said, I'm very confident that we can absorb that impact with some of the normal increases without any specific increase tied to this referendum.
And the dollar amount that was decided upon to send to voters is $6.5 million. Can you describe the process that happened to arrive at that number, and then who picked out these projects?
Sure. So Mayor DiMartino, myself, we reached out to all the different department heads throughout the city, in getting all of their feedback and input on their near-term capital needs, but also their long-term capital needs. And that allowed us to develop a 5-year capital plan that we were able to share with the capital plan committee. And through that process, the capital plan committee reviews a lot of the requests. They discuss it with the department heads. They discuss it with the mayor. The mayor Mayor DiMartino ultimately made a recommendation on the pieces of equipment that he thought were most needed based on the feedback that he received from his direct reports and from the different departments throughout the city. Obviously, at the end of the day, it was up to the capital committee to decide if they agreed with those recommendations, and then make their own recommendation to the Board of Alders, who ultimately are the ones that had to approve what the final number was and and then go into the referendum, which fortunately they did do in the last board meeting.
And I'm skipping all over the place here, and I apologize. And I should tell people we do have comments open. If people want to ask questions, please go ahead and do so. I live in Derby, but I'm sure people out there have lived here longer and have better questions than I can come up with. So please ask away. You can also support the Valley Indy by joining our YouTube channel or purchasing a super chat. You can pay $2 and call me fat if you want, and I'll put it up here on the screen. But in terms of the actual referendum, is this going to be all or nothing? Are the items voted on individually? Do you know how that is going to work?
Yeah, it's my understanding it's going to be all or nothing. So if it passes, we will move forward with purchasing of those equipment and start to order things. Now, obviously, like I said, it takes time for fire engines to be built, up to 4 years before they can be finally delivered. And you don't have to pay for them up front. You have time. So again, that will allow us to spread out some of these costs over that 4-year period.
And then in terms of, obviously, this is almost an emergency services referendum. You've got 2 Derby Fire Department pumper trucks, a rescue truck for storm engine, and then the public radio system, the public safety radio system. Those are a bunch of big ticket items on there. And just for viewers, we are going to have on Monday, 12:30 p.m., this YouTube channel, Fire Commissioner Gary Parker, Fire Chief Thomas Biggs, and Storm Rescue Chief Thomas Leonard Sr. to talk about those specific needs, the status of the trucks now and why they need to be replaced. So that's coming up. So I had questions, and if you can answer this in general, I guess, like the chiller at Derby Middle School. I guess Derby Middle School, we've been around. That was one of the first stories we covered, was the opening of that school in 2009, I want to say, or 2010. What's going on? How come they need a new chiller? What's a chiller, and why do they need it replaced already?
So the thing of a chiller is really your HVAC system, and the initial one that was installed was not sufficient for the size of the building. The one we're proposing is almost double the size of the existing one, which also means that a lot of the pipes and stuff that were connected to the HVAC system will need to be replaced. I think this is just an unfortunate situation where there wasn't enough diligence done initially on what the needs were. I wasn't part of that initial process, but unfortunately, it's not working. It's not getting the job done, and we need to do something correct this time around.
And how does the problems manifest itself? Is it at the middle? Because I know there's a rather complicated arrangement between the middle school and the high school. Is it the chiller involved in that, where I guess excess energy is sent to the high school? I don't really remember how it works, nor am I a contractor. Or does that have anything to do with what we're talking about?
No, I don't believe so. I think this is really just about the equipment that's currently at the middle school, regulates the temperatures of the building, whether that's hot or cold. And honestly, right now, neither's working properly. So it's too hot, or it's too cold, or it's neither. So this is just something that's got to get done in order to fix that temperature, so that folks aren't, freezing in the winter and boiling in the summer.
And yeah, I know last year, at least on one occasion, Derby Middle School had to dismiss early because it just got too hot in the building. And I know that because I have a daughter in the school, and she came out dripping in sweat, although happy to get a half day. So she might convince me to vote no on that just out of her interest. But okay, so that's the Derby Middle School situation. One thing I wanted to ask you, because you did bring up, and this is sort of, you're not supposed to say it, right? But you hear it in the MFAC meetings. We heard it at Derby public meetings of the tax board back under Mayor Zekin's administration, where the first 8-point rescue plan was introduced to bail Derby out of the trouble it had gotten itself into because of budget mistakes. This idea, you hear it in Seymour. I've heard the first select woman of Seymour say this, that really you need to raise the mill rate a little bit each year in order to keep up with expenses. That's just the reality of it. Now, of course, the public is going to say, well, no, you guys need to bring some more business here. You need to get on growing our grand list. But so I have two questions. This time and this is a little political, so I apologize in advance, but this time we're in an election year, and suddenly there was no mill rate increase in Derby. So isn't Derby just going right back to kind of sort of politicizing the mill rate, in that you raise it in off years and then keep it flat during election years? And then secondly, what's being done to grow that grand list?
Sure. No, it's a great point, Eugene. What was different with this year's budget cycle than in years past is, implementing some financial discipline with budgets, right? So, historically, if you allow every department head to raise their budget a little bit, 2-3% for this, that, and the other thing, inflation, well, then you are in a situation where overall you do need to now raise your mill rate per, those kind of increases, right? But Mayor DiArtino this time around was, very tough on all of his department heads and holding the line with their expenses. So if you can get expenses to stay flat, well, then there is no need to raise the mill rate. And, but that's definitely easier said than done, right? Because there's a lot of increases just baked in for contractual reasons that you can't influence, which means now you've got to go back to some of the other discretionary spending and really push back and push hard to reduce those expenses to offset some of your contractual increases. And that's what we did. You can't do that forever, though, Eugene. Eventually at some point you start to really impact some of these services that we're providing. And so, yes, we did it this year. We really wanted to, figure out what is this baseline floor and push everybody as hard as we could financially. But I think myself and the mayor realize, and any mayor is going to be, you can't do it forever. And so eventually you're going to have to raise the mill rates a little bit to keep up with some of those expenses over time.
And then in terms of new development in Derby, I know what's going on there. What are you doing to grow the grand list? Because, one thing we've been hearing for years now in Derby is that the revenue, the city is dependent upon the backs of residential to pay the bills. That's your revenue source. What's being done to change that?
So, was very excited that the metal recycling plant in downtown Maine, it was finally purchased by the city, and the plans are getting in place to move that away so that we can develop all of Main Street, right? That is going to be the biggest thing that Derby can do to increase its grand list, to generate some new tax dollars, and to really offset future taxes. And so that was a big first step. I know that's been many, many, many years in the works, but Mayor DiMartino and the administration got that done this year. So now we just got to continue down that path, get that moved, and start to really develop the downtown area. I think there's some talks of doing some development and more apartments, anywhere we can, right? It's tough to be small, but, at the parking garage, if we have to build some apartments on top of there in order to add some more value to the grand list, we're looking at doing that. So, with a very limited amount of real estate and properties that we have, we're doing the best we can. We sold a couple properties for the first time in a long time, generated almost $200,000 in revenue, but it's, less about that and more about, well, now what's going to happen with those properties. Right now, they're going to be rebuilt and renovated. Some of these dilapidated properties that were acquired by the city many, many years ago, they've just been sitting around doing nothing, generating no value. And now we're going to start turning that around. So that's another step we're taking. We're chipping away with these little pieces, doing what we can, and hopefully net, it really starts to grow and offset, some of these other increases that we unfortunately are going to have just due to inflation.
And going back to the most recent budget, I know there was a little bit, and this is me characterizing it, so I reserve the right to be absolutely wrong. But as someone who's observed those meetings, and I was listening to you talk, there was a little bit of a roll of the dice with the budget this year, because one of your cost-cutting measures was to switch insurance carriers. Is that correct?
Correct.
And how did that work out?
I don't know. I consider roll of the dice. I think it was a very, strategic and decision that was made to do that.
I meant. I'll just say that. But the budget was passed before the deal was signed. Correct.
Correct. It certainly could have fallen apart. You have to apply to get into the Connecticut partnership, which is the new health insurance that the city ultimately moved to. And so they might not have accepted this. You're correct. It certainly could have happened that way, but it's a much better plan for the vast majority of all of the city employees. We're excited about it. It's going to help stabilize costs, right? When you're self-insured, you have no idea what your costs are going to be. You can look at historical averages. You can keep your fingers crossed. You can buy some reinsurance or stop losses, they call it, to do your best to mitigate it. But ultimately, you can't really affect when people get sick or don't get sick. So that's just a risk that the city's been taking. And it's really contributed to some high increases in medical costs year after year after year that you have to find a way to cover. Going forward, now that we'll be fully insured versus self-insured, you know exactly what your costs are going to be. There's no surprises. You can budget for it and plan appropriately.
And do you have? I know there was a projected savings amount. Do you remember what that number is?
It was around $700,000, if I recall correctly.
And that's a mill, right? Isn't $700,000?
That is mill, yeah. And that was key, right? That was the main reason we were able to not have to increase it, was mitigating that increase.
Gotcha. And then the reason I brought you on was to talk about the upcoming referendum and its capital needs. These are things that were sort of vetted and discussed by this capital planning commission, which hadn't met in years. I guess that's something else to point out. I mean, it is accurate to say these big ticket items, these things that cannot be paid for out of the operating budget, you need to borrow money over time in order to do this, sort of like financing a house. These were things that were definitely put to the wayside. Now, why that happened is subject to debate. You have people saying, well, the prior administrations just ignored it, but the prior administration said, well, we had a whole hornet's nest of other financial problems we were trying to deal with, so we really couldn't, we had to put that stuff on the back burner. But this is just sort of a drop in the bucket, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, when it comes to the requests that are out there, because Derby is trying to play catch up. It's it seems that the ones that are going to voters in November are, fire trucks. You've got, we're going to have firefighters on here Monday who are saying, like, I think all the trucks might be older than Chief Biggs at this point. So maybe he looks young, but there's other, I guess my question is, are we going to see a scenario where every 3 to 5 years, Derby residents are going to be asked to pay for another $3 million to chip away at that to-do list?
Right. So you look, you're certainly right in that it was a much larger list than $6.5 million. It was almost $37 million worth of requests that come in for everyone. Now, lots of times that's a wish list, right? So things that maybe aren't necessarily needed right now, but it is a 5-year planning period. So, eventually new roofs have to get replaced and HVAC systems have to get replaced. Things don't last forever, right? So I think Mayor DiMartino and the committee did a great job picking the biggest needs and the most immediate needs, which were a lot of these emergency services vehicles and systems that were in place. It's most critical for ensuring the safety of the Derby residents. So I'm firmly supportive of the decisions they made. As far as will this continue on in the future, there definitely are capital needs. I don't know that any of them are as critically needed as these emergency services ones are needed, but it will be up to the administration and the capital committee to decide, at what point, hey, we've got to do this, and do they offer up another referendum, like you said, for $3, $4, $5 million, these spread it over time. I will say that there are some benefits of doing that, though, in that, in a perfect world, maybe we would have already done some of this so that it didn't feel like such a big number all at once, right? But because it hadn't been done in so long, and we had to go a little bit maybe more than you'd like to. Doing $1 million, $2 million every year, every other year, I think that's pretty typical for most municipalities. You have to continue to invest in your infrastructure, no different than in any business or anything else. If you don't, you really run a lot of risks.
And if anybody's just joining us, this is almost over. Hit rewind. But this is Brian Hall. He is the City of Derby's finance director, and Derby has a 6.5 capital needs referendum that goes to voters on Election Day, November 4th, 2025. At the top of the broadcast, Mr. Hall said that he does not think if it's passed, it will have a direct impact on the mill rate because they'll be able to manage the debt so that it doesn't impact the mill rate and your taxes. This $6.5 million package specifically. Now, the other big news in terms of Derby finances, because I think everybody running for office, everybody in the city, everybody knows that finances is Derby. Or the problem with finances in Derby is the number one issue. The city has been in front of the Municipal Finance Advisory Commission since 2020. I believe it was voluntary, and then it became mandatory. You made an appearance this week. And I have a story ready to go. Those are very difficult to report on. Okay, I'll tell people right now. So because it's complicated. It's a bunch of bean counters who are really into counting beans, right? It's sort of like listening to people talking in another language. But it seemed to me, I guess what I took out of it as a layman was that, okay, so you had the 2023-2024 audit on display as part of your submissions that the state panel asked about. That audit showed that Derby finished that fiscal year with a fund balance $1.8 million larger than it had been the year before, which is good. There seems to be this feeling that Derby is on the right track right now, but there are still some outstanding issues found in audits repeatedly in terms of record keeping. Double entry accounting seems to be the one that got a lot of attention this week at MFACT, and the fact that the school district still doesn't have double entry accounting. I don't want to ask you what that means because I guess people can Google it, but what's the downside? What is the potential for mistakes, or what's the vulnerability from not having a system like that in place?
Sure. And look, before I address it, I would like to say that I thought that MFAC meeting went very well this week. I was extremely happy. I thought they were very supportive of all the progress that we've been making with our reporting, with our transparency, with our budgeting. We're essentially down to just the one thing left on their checklist for why somebody would be in front of MFAC. And I can tell you that there are a number of municipalities that will probably be on many of those checklists multiple times and aren't there. So, that said, MFAC committee is a great help. They were a big part of us getting to that place. So I have no problem, reporting to them every other month. I think it's very prudent and they're very fair and helpful. So I was very excited about that meeting. I think, like you said, it went well. We've reduced some of those deficiencies in the audit, but like you said, there's still some more work to do with the double entry accounting and some of the challenges at the Board of Ed, which we talked a little bit about in that meeting. Our Board of Ed is one person, is a director, and he's got an AP person, accounts payable, and a payroll person. That's not a lot of resources, especially.
And that's a common thing. I'm sorry to interrupt, but in terms of these municipalities that end up in front of MFAC, because now I've sat through a bunch of these meetings and it's like, oof. But you hear we don't have the staff. And this is what we heard in Derby when this first happened. I remember Andrew Backlick, the chief of staff, saying, well, look, we're bare bones here. And that seems to be one of the common denominators in terms of these municipalities that end up in front of MFAC. So the school business office is terribly short-staffed.
Yeah, and short-staffed implies that there's budget to hire more people and you can't. And at this point, there is no budget. This is the staff that the Board of Ed has determined. This is it. This is what you get. You have to figure. And, maybe if you've got the right people with your couple of people there, if they're all rock stars, you can possibly get it done. But I know, and there's no knock on the Board of Ed staff, but that's very hard to do in the municipal world. I think they've smartly gone out and hired some consultants to bring in to help with some of their challenges. So I'm very, hopeful and optimistic that we're going to see some improvement there. If we can get rid of these last few deficiencies, then we can get off MFAC altogether. We'll have nothing left on that checklist and we'll really be in great shape. I think even far better than most municipalities in Connecticut at that point. So,
okay, Mr. Hall, those are all my questions. I just want to ask you if there's anything you wanted to touch upon, whether it be about the referendum that's coming up and the capital needs, the things that are on there, or Derby finances in general.
I'll just say that, like I said, I was very happy with the progress that we've been making with some of the results. The Board of Alders has been very supportive in passing the appropriate amount of legislation so that things are moving in Derby in the right direction, whether that's buying the recycling center, whether that's helping push some new business, even if it's just solar panels in our transfer station. They're doing the best they can to figure out how we can grow the grand list. And I think ultimately that's what needs to continue to happen. Mayor DiMartino, I'm looking forward to continuing to work with him. He's done a great job helping right this ship. I look forward to him continuing to do that and helping Derby get on the right path and get out of MFAC and really start to become a model for what municipal government can look like. And I think even despite having limited resources that we do, much smaller than anybody else, again, we're getting to the place where we're finding the right people. It was a big thing I called up in MFAC. It's not just having fully staffed, it's finding the right people in your staff to do a great job. And I think we're getting there. So look, I'm excited about it. And, I just want to kind of continue on this path and help make Derby stronger financially. I think we're almost at the point where the fund balance is going to be at 10%, which is the target level after this.
What's that 10% of?
10% of expenses.
Gotcha.
So you want to make sure you've got that in reserves. And, that's always been a problem, especially when it came to the rating agencies. They said, oh, your fund balance is too low. Fund balance is too low. I mean, we were on a trajectory to have negative fund balance and, potentially go bankrupt right before Mayor DiMartino came into office, and we started to really change some things. So now we've completely turned it around to the point where the fund balance is going to be there. When we have surpluses, now we can start to put that money into a capital fund. And then hopefully at that point, now I don't have to go to referendum and borrow all this money because we've got it. We've got it in reserves and in capital funds, which is what a lot of municipalities end up doing. So I think we're getting really close to operating at peak efficiency.
All right, sir. Well, again, I want to thank you for your transparency, for being willing to come on here and just have a freewheeling conversation about the city and how it collects and spends its money. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Eugene. It was a pleasure, and I'm happy to come anytime you need me.
Thank you, sir. Take care. And that's the end of this broadcast, everybody. Come back Monday. There's going to be a part 2. Going to have Tom Leonard, Chief Parker, Commissioner Parker, and Chief Biggs on to talk why the city or why the fire department and the rescue services need new apparatus. Peace.